stuff. So we are recording this. So we've got about 4 people with us right now and 4 panelists or 3 panelists, but we'll record this for folks who can't attend today. My name is Ann Chesky. I am a board member of the Federation of North Carolina Historical Societies. I'm also the executive director at the Presbyterian Heritage Center. I've also served as executive director of 2 other small nonprofit museums. So certainly if we've got other web managers or folks in charge of small museums, I understand your pain. We'll talk about our website at the Presbyterian Heritage Center later today and kind of show some of the struggles that we have when we're wearing multiple hats and also trying to create accessible websites. If you're not familiar with the Federation, we offer some really great stuff. The things that have been most beneficial in my experience have been the bulletin that gets sent out. I think it's, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's sent out once a month or quarterly, and I'm sorry that I don't know that off the top of my head, but it comes in my inbox. It's got great news about what all of our Federation members are doing, as well as in the back, grants that we can apply for, which is wonderful and super helpful. Also, we offer some mini grants every year, which I know for small nonprofits can be really life-changing for us. So check out our website. We'll have more information about that at the end. And thanks for joining us. I am just going to let you know we've got Danny and Laura here with us who are much more informed about website accessibility than me, and I'll let them introduce themselves. But thanks so much for coming, and we will do questions in the chat. So if you want to type into the chat during the presentation, I probably will not interrupt unless it seems super timely with questions, but we will have time at the end for questions. So thanks for being here. Oh, look, and we got another person. So we'll get started.
Okay, great. Thank you, Anne. And thank you to our small and mighty audience that we have today. My name is Danny Sharilla, and if that looks or sounds familiar, it's because I actually help Adrienne Burney coordinate the Federation, including developing the bulletin newsletter, which does come monthly as of right now, in MailChimp form. So thanks for that plug, Anne. Before we get into the more actionable items you can do to prepare your online presence for these regulation changes that we're going to focus on in this webinar, I'm going to try to provide a little bit of background as to why this might be relevant to you. So in April of 2024, the Department of Justice issued a ruling that updated the regulations for Title II of the Americans with Disabilities Act, or ADA, that mandates state and local governments ensure their web content and mobile applications are accessible to people with disabilities. A good rule of thumb when determining if this mandate applies to your organization is to consider where you get your funding. If you have a stream of funding from your local government or operate on grant funding, you can probably assume that these rules apply to you. But even if you're unsure, adhering to these guidelines will ensure that individuals with disabilities can access your information online and just promotes inclusivity in general. So the Website Content Accessibility Guidelines, or WCAG, I think is the acronym, which I know doesn't sound very attractive. That was developed by the World Wide Web Consortium and provides a comprehensive set of guidelines to make web content more accessible. These guidelines have 4 main principles: perceivable, operable, understandable, and robust, which you can always remember with POUR. I don't know how POUR is necessarily relevant, but it is an acronym that I use. Each principle aims to make web content accessible in various ways, such as providing text alternatives for non-text content like images, which Lori will get into later probably, and myself as well, and ensuring that users can browse your website using only a keyboard, which is useful for those with limited hand mobility. Federal agencies also need to adhere to Section 508 of the Rehabilitation Act, but as this is only pertinent if your organization receives federal funding, I'll leave that to you to research on your own time. In addition to providing a more inclusive digital environment for people accessing your web content, implementing WCAG, I hate that acronym, and guidelines from the Title II mandate can make your website significantly easier to find online. The easier your website is to find online, the better your search engine optimization, or SEO, which is search engines like Google. They prioritize websites that are accessible and user-friendly. So this means that accessible websites are more likely to appear at the top of Google search results, driving in more traffic and increasing the visibility of your organization, which is always a good thing. Yet another benefit of adhering to these guidelines is that accessibility improvements often lead to better mobile experience, because a cell phone can properly resize a page when it's developed with proper headings that need to stay in the same order, which we'll get into a bit more later as well. And as more and more people access online content on their phones, search engines list websites that perform well on cell phones higher in their search results. So again, driving in more traffic to your website. Generally, the increase in clear navigation, readable text, and intuitive actions benefit everyone, not just people with disabilities. So now I'm going to hand it off to Lori to talk about what these improvements actually look like. So I'll stop screen sharing my slides.
Hi, everybody. I will share my slides. I'll do my introduction first. My name is Lori Townsend. I'm the research historian within the Office of Research and Publications, but I also serve as a web manager for a state web page. And let's see, I need to share first. Can you see my screen? No. Okay, let's do that. What about now? Which screen are you seeing? Are you seeing the presentation?
Yeah, we're seeing the PowerPoint.
Wonderful. And let me. Cool. So I'm going to kind of get into some of that nitty gritty that Danny mentioned with how to make your web pages just some very simple, actionable things that you can implement that will go over guidelines, best practices, and kind of the impact that some of those things can have that maybe you haven't considered. The first one, and the one that comes up the most often, is your font. Choosing your font. This includes the size, the type of font, all of those things are things that you can consider as you are starting to work with your websites. And this
Hey,
is going to
Lori,
help you.
Sorry to
Yes.
interrupt you. It's still showing just the whole PowerPoint screen and not the individual slides.
Ah, it's showing me presenter mode. Interesting. Thank you for bringing that up. I'm going to unshare and then reshare because I think I have 3 screens here, and that's probably the issue. Doesn't know which screen to do. So if I pop it over here and
Ooh, that's cool. Now we can see a library, like a Harry Potter library.
oh, that's my background. That's not what you should be seeing either. All right, let's try this one more time. Screen 2. This screen with my. Is it showing the presentation mode where you can see the full slide?
I can see the full slide, but I also see like all the slides on the side. So, and Amanda, oh, thanks, Danny. You are muted. I think everyone's muted except for me and Lori right now. So, and I think Danny
Okay.
also has control over everything. So if someone's not muted, she can mute you.
It's taking over the wrong screen, and I'm not sure why.
So I think when you have 3 screens, once you start screen sharing, you can still toggle between. So once you hit present, you're going to have to go back to where you push share and then just change the screen that you're sharing.
Okay, well, that worked. Yes.
No.
No.
But you might just be able to go through the slides as long as you're on the right. Oh, there you
Oh,
go.
that worked.
All right. Sorry, everybody, for the technical difficulties. It is the 3 screens. It was sharing the 3rd screen when it told me it was sharing the 2nd screen. So jumping back into Fonts, the fun world of fonts. The reason you want to care about this is because it will help you meet those accessibility standards, but it also increases the readability of your site, which you want people to be able to read. And it does affect everybody. And it affects a lot of people that you may not even consider. So what you want to aim for in your body text is between 12 and 15 point font, but that can change depending on your layout. And this is 16 pixels for some of your websites that may allow you to do the specific pixel size. Your larger text, such as your titles, your headlines, you want to aim for a bit of a larger font. This is a common one that I see a lot, and it's avoiding all caps. And this is so important for accessibility. And what it does is if a font is in all caps and somebody with a visual impairment uses the shape of the word to help recognize it, then an all caps fonts removes that for them. So they can no longer distinguish a word by its shape. And as someone with a visual impairment, I can tell you that is so important to me because I can't quite see the word, but I can see what the bookends look like, and that can help somebody figure out what word it is. The larger fonts also contribute to that. And then your recommended fonts are going to be your sans serif fonts, your fonts without serifs. And I have an example of that on the next slide. But those include the really popular fonts like Times New Roman, Arial, and Calibri. What is a serif? I know that's something that everybody says use sans serif fonts, but what is a serif? So the serif is that little essentially flare at the end of the main point of letters. So on the end of this T, there is a serif, and what it is, when it's there and it's in a string of sentences, it typically makes the words harder to read. So in the digital format, fonts without serifs are recommended. Something else that I have seen that's really critical is your line spacing. And Danny might get into this too, even with print format, because it's really important there as well, of making sure that your paragraphs have appropriate spacing. And some websites will auto do this for you, but sometimes you have to force it. So making sure it's not too little or too much. And I have some examples there that if you're overlapping your letters, it's too close together. Another consideration with font is visibility, but visibility with contrast. So high contrast between text and background colors help all users. And you can use contrast checkers for this if you're not sure. There's lots of them online. This is one I've used before, WebAIM or WebAIM. And it can help you ensure that you're compliant because it will actually give you specific statistics on your visibility with contrast. And I have put kind of an example here at the bottom, which is hard to see because there's no contrast between the white background and the gray text. The font is also smaller. I've made the font smaller, which makes it harder to read. And then you can see even the hyperlink, and I will get into that too, is not distinguished. So it makes it harder for somebody to understand that there's a hyperlink there, which is the WebAIM. This is important with contrast too. I'm using maps as an example, but color blindness or color vision deficiency can come into play here. So making sure if you're trying to convey information that you're not just doing it with color, but you need to be doing it with symbology. Because this same map in a grayscale, you can't tell the difference. It's going to be very hard for somebody to distinguish Avery County from Davidson County unless they already know. So just color alone is not enough in a lot of these cases. And that includes your print documents as well. One way to get around this is not only to use color differences, but symbology differences. And this applies to things other than maps, but maps is one of my favorite examples to use. So even if the star and the heart for Rutherford and Wake County were the same color as they are in that bottom map, you can still read the legend and know which one is which because there's a symbology difference. So if you're making like any type of directional maps for events that you're doing or hosting or things like that, how to navigate to the outside patio for an event, making sure you're distinguishing things with symbology and not just color. And that's for your websites as well, right? When you're putting these things online, because we get a lot of web maps. Moving away from specific fonts and how to make those more accessible is your linked text. And these are on everybody's website. They are very useful tools, but there is a way to make them more accessible. There's a couple tips there. They are also called sometimes hyperlinks, linked text, or quick links, depending on what platform you're using. And they should be short and descriptive. And a lot of tips for this, I do have another example to show you, but you're going to want it to open in the same window most of the time, unless there's a very valid reason for it to open in a new window. Otherwise, screen readers or people using accessibility aids, it's like, why can't I back up anymore? Like, because it won't let you back up if you open something in a new window. And you're also going to want to ensure that the color is contrasting or underlined to indicate visually that there is a hyperlink there. And blue is kind of the universal color for most hyperlinks. So do's and don'ts for this. So this is one that I see all the time, and people will create their hyperlinks and it says, you can learn more about web accessibility here. And the word here is what they have used for their hyperlink. And the reason we don't want to do that, so I'll read the proper example next, is you should learn more about web accessibility from the Web Accessibility Initiative. And Web Accessibility Initiative is the hyperlink. And when a screen reader, you can be set to just go through and list out all of the hyperlinks. If somebody's looking for like where they want to go on a page and they're navigating, it'll read Web Accessibility Initiative and it'll read here. And if you have a whole page of hyperlinks that just say here, 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 that's all they're hearing. There's no context with them. So it's very important to make those as descriptive, but short. And that can really help improve the accessibility on your page. Alternative text, or alt text as it's most commonly called, is also really essential on website pages. They improve accessibility for visually impaired users and users with the screen readers. They enhance your SEO because images that have alt text are more likely to appear in a search result. And it displays a lot of this text. A lot of web pages will have it built in to display text when the image doesn't load, so somebody can still get that context. And kind of in short, it makes your content more usable, searchable, and accessible. And there are some do's and don'ts with alt text as well. And I've got, a good example here of, you want it to be descriptive, but not too lengthy or like bogged down. Another thing is you don't need to add picture of or image of at the beginning, because most screen reader technologies will indicate that it's on a picture. So for this picture of a map of North Carolina with a little thumbtack in the middle, a good alt text would be outline of North Carolina with red thumbtack marking the geographic center. So it's avoids unnecessary words. It does not indicate that it is an image at the beginning, and it's descriptive in its purpose. So I know that was a lot to throw at you. I made a little checklist at the end, and I believe we'll be able to share our slides. So with your fonts, you've got a number of things to consider. Is it a sans serif font? What size is it? What's the color? Is the contrast appropriate? Spacing, and then hyperlinks and alternative text. Those are the three big things I just covered. And a lot of that will translate to, I believe, what Danny is going to start us out with, which is your visual print materials and kind of PDF remediation, I believe.
Thank you, Lori. So if you want to stop.
Yes.
So while we're getting that worked out, I do have a little bit of a spiel to give you before we get into the demonstration portion of our afternoon. So when it comes to PDF accessibility, And by the way, just to clarify, when I say PDFs, I'm not necessarily talking about things that you're going to print out to post around your building as flyers or anything like that. I'm talking about PDFs that you have on your web page to provide information to users, right? So print kind of accessibility has its own hurdles that you have to consider, but I'm exclusively talking about PDFs that you have on a website. So when it comes to PDF accessibility, a helpful rule of thumb for me has been to try to think like a screen reader, like Lori mentioned, for a few reasons. For one, screen readers can't read PDFs when they're only a link on a website. It will just read that link text that Lori talked about. And that serves as a good reminder to create link text that is descriptive, and also that having a PDF linked on a website is an additional barrier to that information, as it requires an additional click to access. So always think long and hard about whether having a separate PDF is even necessary for those reasons. Also, remember that screen readers can't see images, so it will not read out what is in an image to a user. Instead, you have to remember to use alt text. Everything that Lori mentioned earlier applies to PDFs, so still be mindful of the fonts, the colors, the alt text, all of that is still a part of this, since you are viewing those PDFs online. Another tip is that screen readers progress down a page in order of headings, so you need to be mindful of how you design a PDF. Luckily, if you're using Microsoft Suite like PowerPoint or Word to create documents, you can use their built-in headings to create accessible documents. So that's in that top kind of toolbar where it says title, heading 1, heading 2. But if you aren't using those built-in headings, you will need to add in your own accessibility tags. And for the demonstration I'm about to give, we'll assume that you have not used those built-in headings for obvious reasons. So let me share my screen. Guess I can only avoid doing this for so long. While I do have training with PDF accessibility, I'm not the most confident tech person. So this might be, let's see. Okay, what screen are you seeing?
Seeing a PDF, but we can see the whole thing with the tools on the sides.
Perfect. I couldn't have asked for a better answer, Anne. Okay, so for the purposes of this workshop, I've created a sample PDF to work through text and images to reflect the most common scenarios you may encounter with your own PDFs. I'm not sure about other PDF software, but Adobe will try its darndest to tag your PDFs for you. So this demonstration will include how to remediate mistakes Adobe will inevitably make if that is your software of choice. The ideas are transferable to any software though. Okay, so to even access accessibility tags on Adobe for your PDFs, you can either do a long form going from edit to, I think, oh, then you just actually just come over here. It's this tag on the right toolbar. And if you hover over it, it'll say add, delete, or edit accessibility tags. So if you click that, you can see that Adobe has tried to do some work for us, because these, you see the little carrots, the right and left carrots, those indicate tags. And so P for paragraph, L for list, figure meeting images. So that's just what's included in this document that I have here. So for most times, you're not going to be able to just, highlight text, make your tag like that. You're going to have to do what Adobe's already given you. And the reason that's kind of complicated is because, so let's say, we don't need this additional level below document, right? We don't need 2 different levels indicating the same thing. So instinct will tell me, well, I'll just delete whatever the sect means, section, when in reality there's, no sections. I'll just delete that. You cannot do that because the way Adobe works is if you have things included under a level of something, so under the sect, we have all of these paragraph tags, a list tag, etc. That will all be deleted as well. I don't know why it does that, but it will just corrupt your PDF document. So it's very important to take the amount of tedious time that you'll see me about to do, reordering what you've already been given before you start deleting things. So my first step, when I look at this document, I see these tags. I don't think we need two different levels that indicate the same things. Because you see, when I click document, all of that pink highlights the entire document. And when I click sect, all of that pink highlights the entire document still. So my first step would be to take all of these tags under sect and move them outside of sect just to be under document. So step one for me would be select one tag, and then I would hold down control and click each additional tag. This is gonna allow me to do one mass move of all of these tags. So now I have them all kind of grouped together. I'm gonna click one and drag it to be under that document level. So I've grabbed them all, and you can see, actually some of them. Okay, so you can see this little line that you can see moving when I move my cursor. That's our group of tags that we have clicked. So you're gonna try to put it under document. Okay, perfect. So now sect is just a random section under document, and all of those tags that we want to work with are now outside of that. So now we can safely delete sect without deleting content on our PDF. So you're gonna right click that and click delete tag. Okay, done. Actually, now that I'm seeing it, I don't think it even. So all of these little tags, let's see if I can move it under. Okay, yes. So it's all under this main document tag. Hopefully you can see my mouse. Okay, yes, perfect. All under these top two document level tags. So now we're gonna kind of click through and see what order that leaves us in. Because if you remember, screen readers are gonna read through things in the order of those accessibility tags. So we want to check to make sure that everything's gonna be read out in the order that we desire. And so first of all, the first tag does the title, which is good. Second tag is empty. So if a screen reader comes across this, they're gonna just not say anything. It's just a waste of space. So we're gonna go ahead and right click and delete tag. So the next one is correct, good order. Go ahead and delete another empty tag. Delete empty tag. Okay, so everything looks like it's in the correct order now. So now that we have, if it wasn't, you could do what I did earlier, just moving around things in the order to make it correct. But now we can kind of look into the more nitty-gritty, more interesting stuff. So luckily, the Adobe automatic tags read a bulleted list correctly. However, if you ever have a list of something, whether it's a 1, 2, 3 numbered list or a bulleted list, you need to make sure that you're using the L tag in Adobe and not the paragraph tag, just to make sure that a screen reader doesn't say the first list item, the second list item, the third list item. It'll say first item, first list item, second item, second list item. So to more clearly indicate that it's a list. But luckily that's done for us. Thank goodness. So then if we go to this figure tag, now we need to think about, okay, did I add alt text to this image? We can check if we go into that tag and we right click the image, and it should be, I think it's under properties. Yes. Okay. Can you see the additional window that just opened? Okay. So here in this box, you can see that Adobe's AI attempted to give us an alternate text option. It just says text, comma, letter. I think we can do a bit better. And also, I'm not sure if when AI does it, if it reads this part out, the AI generated content may be incorrect. So I always just do it by hand. Maybe there's a more efficient way to do this. But so I'm going to go ahead and delete this alternate text for images that we have there. And I'm going to write my own. So maybe, I don't know if this is going to be a great example, but maybe folder of archival documents. Let's just say that as an example. You could probably do better than that, but for the purposes of this, we'll do that. Kind of an annoying thing is to make sure that your alternate text saves, you need to click out of that initial box. I think that's just a glitch that Adobe has, but once you click into another text box, it should save. And then you click close. So that's done. So that's all. Now, whenever a screen reader comes through that image, it'll say folder of well, it didn't reload. Once you save, it'll say folder of archival documents. And so if we scroll down here, there's another figure. And this, I think, is a good way to exemplify, what an informational image could be versus what just a decorative image could be. I don't think it would be very useful for a screen reader to hit this image and then say an array of dots that looks like a star or something, like you want to kind of save the screen reader's time for actual informational imagery. So to mitigate that, we can just mark this as decorative. So that way it won't be read out by a screen reader. And this can be useful if you have like a logo repeating on every single page of something. Like you don't want to waste anybody's time by having to fast forward and speed through these things. So if you have just a decorative image, you can go into, I don't know why it's called path, but go into path, right click. And then if you click change tag to artifact, that'll just, wipe it clean. So you'll still see it visually, but the screen reader won't read it out. I guess just okay. That'll do it for that's kind of a bare bones thing. I'm not, I can't do behind the scenes coding to make it look extremely perfect, but that'll at least meet the regulations of, okay, a screen reader can go through this. You have alt text, you have your decorative images marked as decorative. So that's kind of the important takeaway are those common tags of documents, headings, paragraphs, lists, and your images or figures as Adobe puts them. So the reminder to think like a screen reader is a good way to check behind yourself. Heading should be in the order of how you naturally read it on a page. And you can be sure to check this. Like if you're not convinced that these tags are the way to do it, you can click this ... And then there should be something, reading order. And then you can say, I think show. Oh, maybe not. Show order panel. Okay, so this will show you, it goes 1, 2, 3, and then 4. It'll do the image last. I don't know why, because I guess because we didn't save it. But for the most part, you can check how it's gonna go through the headings with this part of Adobe. But the tags are gonna be correct. So I prefer that way of checking, but if you want to double check behind yourself, you can definitely do that. But when in doubt, I'm going to try to put this link in the chat. Let's see. So when in doubt, this link that I'm about to send in the chat is a really good way to check behind yourself, because this website has tutorial videos, a glossary, and a checklist to make sure you haven't forgotten any steps. But for the most part, that's kind of the bare basics of what you can do for your PDFs to just make them screen reader legible. So I'll go ahead and stop my sharing.
Danny,
Then we go. Yes, Lauren?
we had one question come in the chat that was related to the creating of the paragraph headings or the paragraphs versus headings. Is there a heading tag?
There are heading tags. For this purpose, for like the bare minimum of the screen reader, I didn't think that it was super useful to add another like variable to get into. And like I said, I'm not like the behind the scenes changing the HTML coding kind of thing. But yes, there are. And if you choose to look deeper into that, that resource that I put in the chat is going to be where you go. And I think with that, it sends off to Anne.
All right, well, let's share this. So I'm going to share our website with the Presbyterian Heritage Center. I will tell you, I've been there, I started in January of last year, so a little over a year and a half. At this position and in my last two positions, I have had to create a website. I have no website training. I have learned by doing. I've used both WordPress and Wix. And if you all are anything like me, I'm just trying to get it to a place where it's functional. And so going into the accessibility standards is like the next step. And it's something that I want to do. It's not something that I've super looked into. Having just this webinar and some of the information provided here, I think will be incredibly useful as I create new pages, because doing it, if I know how to do it going in, then I don't have to go back and do it. So if I know that there's a font size or a color contrast and I do it the first time, it's much more likely to actually happen. And I'm sure that that's true of a lot of folks. And so we'll look at this website. I created this last year. And I'll say it's not going to hurt my feelings when we pick it apart, because I'll say I created this as a placeholder. We actually have got money to have a web design firm design a website, which I thought was going to get launched last year. But if you all are in small nonprofits, you know, everything takes longer than you might hope. So we still haven't launched it. So we're still using my placeholder website, which I keep feeling like I'm not going to update because we're going to have the new website soon. Still hasn't happened. But this is a great time for me to kind of go through some of this, because we will be launching a website and I will be updating said website. And so hopefully, you know, I can implement some of this. The only other thing I want to say before we start looking at this is, when it just flew out of my head. Well, I'll come back to it. So let's start looking at the website. And I know, did you all want to look at... So this is a fairly standard WordPress template. When you get into WordPress, you can choose all kinds of different themes. I kind of just chose one that looked good and that was responsive. And so it does, the nice thing about it, it does work for a cell phone or a tablet. And if you use WordPress, I have found that the easiest thing for me to do is use these different post types and set different categories of posts. So then they will just kind of automatically show up wherever I might want them. So when I put in a new post of exhibits and check at exhibits, it shows up here. Same thing with our print newsletters, history spotlight, etc. So they're all kind of done using the same thing. So the first one I want to kind of have us look at is, we do a print newsletter. We also do a monthly e-newsletter. The print newsletter is done in Adobe InDesign. And I'm now just having heard Danny's presentation on PDFs. I'm very interested in what a screen reader would do with this document. So what we have is, I have to put it in a post type to get it to show up on the main web page. So this is, again, it's kind of a placeholder. No, I cannot have it linked directly to the PDF from that page, just because of how the post type works. So what I did instead was put a large image of the front page of the newsletter with a link to view the PDF newsletter. And so now that I know there's accessibility stuff over here, now I'm curious what I would even click to see that. And maybe you guys can help me with that.
I'm not used to the browser version so much, but I would assume it would be on your right-hand side. Somewhere in there.
Well, at any rate, I did not know that existed. I'm sure a lot of people also did not know that existed. And just from what I've heard so far, looking at this, and even this, the way that it's organized in columns, I imagine might be problematic for a screen reader.
You can search the toolbar for accessibility and see what shows up if we just want to see how it's kind of, how did it tag it, right, without any work being done.
Okay, there it is.
Yeah.
You all are in front of it with the faces. Okay, so accessibility. But is that gonna search well, let's just see what
It,
happens.
yeah,
I think that just searches for.
is just searching the document. Okay. There should be a toolbar. I'm also don't use the web browser version because all your tools are on the left over there. And I don't know if you can see it if you scroll down further or
Yeah, because I didn't know that was a thing. But that's interesting to me, and I'd like to be able to figure that out. But again, now might not be the time for me to necessarily troubleshoot it. But like if we were looking at this particular PDF, like knowing that this is primarily our print newsletter that we mail out to folks, but then we also include it on our website and send it to folks we don't have a mailing address for, but do have an email address for. So people are getting this as PDFs, maybe in their email inbox, and maybe they're accessing it from our website. I always felt like the nice thing about PDFs is that, even if you are opening it in your browser, you can make it as big as you need to. But again, I don't know what a screen reader would do with something like this.
Yeah, so I think you bring up an interesting point about like the purpose of a PDF, like the intention behind it really does indicate how you should be handling it for accessibility. So for the aspect of, you're sometimes printing it out, you're sometimes emailing it as an attachment, theoretically as real mail, right? Just email. I think that it's fine to have, PDFs are a great resource to send things out as long as you can, whether it's through Adobe, whether it's through Edge, whether it's through, whatever software you're using, kind of click through and make sure that it's reading correctly. I think columns shouldn't be a problem. The only times that we see columns being a problem with screen readers is in tables, because an interesting thing about tables is that it's not going to it's going to read row by row, meaning it's going to say all of your column headings and it's just going to read one row of information, one row of information. And so sometimes it can get confusing for someone using a screen reader, like, okay, so I just heard this information, but I don't know what column it's under because they said the column so early on. So I think, a table is making sure that that's small enough to stay intuitive when you're receiving that information. But otherwise, like with PDFs, I think that's a completely fine way to use them. When it's going to be a link like you have on your website for the newsletter itself, the view PDF newsletter, I'm sure Lori will indicate that the descriptive link text is probably needed there. I think that having that image, like that screenshot of the actual PDF, that's never going to be recommended, having like really text heavy images. I would recommend simply copy and pasting the content, or having a larger conversation with your organization about having a more accessible online version, maybe through blog posts or something like that. But sorry if I walked around the question that you actually asked.
Well, so in an ideal world where I have lots of time, what we would recommend, or what you're saying, what we would recommend for a screen reader or for accessibility is really to just stay away from the PDF completely, and make this more into a web page with, and it wouldn't be necessarily super time consuming for me to just copy and paste text into one long web page. Presumably that would be more accessible for folks. I
think that that's the answer to the question of what do I do with this screenshot of information here? I think it's fine to have PDFs on your website, especially if you have maybe a web page listing. Here's all of our newsletters from the past year. Like I wouldn't expect someone to create a blog just to have that content displayed on their website. But when it comes to previews or something like this, that's when it gets to be kind of problematic, where if you're insistent on having something there, then I would say making sure, like if you were to hover your mouse over that image, if there's not that eye that looks like you can kind of highlight text, that means the screen reader can't read it. So just making sure whatever text you have there is screen legible, then go for it.
So then as far as, the link text here, where I have just view PDF newsletter, would it be better for it to say like view the summer 2025 issue, or just something that is more descriptive of what the PDF is? Is that what we're thinking? Or the guidance?
Yeah, let me see the link text again. Sorry.
Oh.
It has view PDF newsletter. Yeah, this specific newsletter I think would be helpful there because they've already clicked into the preview. And if they've got their screen reader set to just read them out hyperlinks, view PDF newsletter is what they're looking for, but having the specific one could be helpful.
Okay.
I wouldn't make it much longer than that.
Mhm.
Because that's a good size. But
And then I'm wondering too, like, so we do a print newsletter 3 times a year. I know a lot of folks have really gone away from print newsletters simply because they are prohibitively expensive and time consuming often to send out. So we also do a monthly e-newsletter through MailChimp. And your experience, is MailChimp just the way that it's already designed? Is that a pretty accessible platform?
if you use all the features, then yes. So MailChimp has a built-in system where you can go in and put alt text for your images. It has those descriptors, but you do have to manually fill out that information. But it's available. Those are features that they have to meet accessibility standards.
So that's sort of similar to WordPress. Like when you upload
Yeah.
a picture, you can put in alt text, but again, it's just like that extra step. And,
Yeah.
I'll admit too, like yesterday, for instance, this is our current exhibit is on Hurricane Helene, which it's all on our minds right now. But, at this point, all I've done is literally put a video up, which we show in the exhibit, and then put our panels, which are again, literally just text heavy images. And as it turns out, I'm giving a presentation on it tomorrow, and had to turn those text heavy images into a presentation, which I did through Story Maps. And I found that, and I'm sure people will relate to this, but like for this first panel, I put in alt text for everything because we had talked about it and preparing for this webinar. But then as we went through and time passed more quickly and I realized I had to have this done for a presentation tomorrow, that's the thing that fell off. And so I guess one of my questions is like, if we were going to prioritize as folks who are wearing 1,000 hats and only have so many hours in a day, like if there are things to prioritize in making our website more accessible, and assuming that for whatever reason we're not legally mandated to have these accessibility features, like what are the priorities that would be the most useful for like putting an exhibit like this online, or the newsletter online, or even just like the homepage? Like what is going to be like the top few things I can do to make this accessible for folks? Because I know we're 12:50. I want to be able to take questions. So that's kind of my I'll end my part on that, and we can always look at more stuff. But
Yeah, I think if I can start us off, I think that Lori's presentation is like a fantastic place to start, just because even if everybody isn't using screen readers, most people are looking at your website, so having those readable fonts, color contrast that makes things legible, and especially if you're using graphics, I think that's very important. And then if I could be so bold as to suggest an extra step, something that our own department and office is doing right now is doing kind of a once over audit just of what PDFs do we have on our website. Like just having that knowledge will really help you moving forward of, you know, when my user goes to my website to find this answer to this question, how many clicks do they have to go through to find it? How many, just having that kind of in the back of your head will help you moving forward as you create more content. So I would say that's kind of the baseline, from my opinion.
I would absolutely agree with everything that Danny has said there, and I would add, if alt text is falling off, you do want it, but when it's essential is if you're putting up an image of, let's say, that presentation you're doing tomorrow, and it's got the date, the time, it's like a little flyer, but it's an image, and you put that up on your website, that absolutely has to have alt text if you do not have that information somewhere else, because a screen that's completely inaccessible to a screen reader right there. And it's conveying really important information, right? So you would want that to either have preferably you would have that text on the page as well. And you wouldn't use an image with a lot of text in it. But if that was the scenario, that's what you had to go up, by the end of the day, then having alt text for those type of graphics.
Okay. So I see what you're saying. So, we've got this image here of one of our exhibits. It would be nice to have alt text on it. But then, when I go to our print newsletter and I've got this image that's literally all the information is in the image. But if you can't see the image, it's really useless to you. So I see what you're saying there. So if I have to pick and choose what I'm doing, yeah, pick the most important ones. But it sounds like to me, definitely we've got, all the stuff on those first slides, and then maybe including alt text. And then maybe if we have time to work with our PDFs, great. And if we can make them accessible in as few clicks as possible, that sounds probably like those would be my priorities in terms of looking at the website or moving forward. Cool. All right, I'm going to stop sharing that. So Michaela says, I just found out that the prepare for accessibility tools may be restricted due to the license that I have with Adobe, which may be the issue. Okay, that's interesting.
I believe that to be the truth, most definitely. That Adobe is what we use at my workplace, but those ideas, even if you can't follow, oh, click here and then do this, the ideas of the tags and the alt text, those are transferable to whatever you're able to use. You can use that in Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, whatever, in WordPress, like Lori said, MailChimp. So while the Adobe thing might be an issue, you can still use the content, I swear.
That's cool. Yeah, I was totally unaware of that functionality just in like a document. Do other people do you all have any closing thoughts, Danny or Lori, or if other people who are attending this want to type anything into the chat? We got about 6 minutes.
I'll just say, I know that in history work, which I'm assuming our audience is mostly in, we do rely on documents and images of documents and scans of documents for our blog posts and our online programs and all of that. So I would just call attention to all of the very document heavy. Do you have transcriptions? Do you have, like, for your blog posts, do you have that alt text embedded? And I know Lori mentioned earlier, you don't need to say image of for certain things. I do think you have to say scan of a document when it comes to that, though, for some weird technicality. So just keeping in mind, since we are so photo of artifact and scan of document reliant in this field, just keeping that in the forefront of the mind.
So, and I have used historic documents a lot in exhibits and presentations, and more and more we're shifting to, at least once the exhibit is over, creating a digital exhibit so that it kind of lasts into whenever. But I'm wondering, when we do those scans, is it insane to try to put, so the alt text would just say scan of a document, but then you might have a transcription underneath it, but not in the alt text.
Correct.
Okay. But it would be ideal to have a transcription of well, I think that that's probably true in all cases. Like with any historic document, it's not easy to read.
Because even thinking outside of ADA and, visual impairments, I don't think that many students are being taught cursive even. So to assume that someone of any age can read your script document that you have in your collection, you know, you can't do that anymore. So you need a transcript preferably all the time.
Right. And certainly, you know, I mean, I find I'm pretty good at reading historic cursive now, but even with that, like you can't keyword search it. Like it's so difficult to read that having the transcription, you know, is going to be so much less time consuming to go through regardless. Um, Interesting.
I guess in closing, I would just add that we know this is a lot, especially for people who are just coming to this or just learning about these new guidelines that are being put in place. And try not to be overwhelmed. Just tackle one thing at a time. Are your fonts sans serif fonts? Just go through your website and see, because that would be something you could just change your fonts to something that's sans serif if it's not, and just one thing at a time, and it'll get there.
Do you all have on your websites that you manage like an accessibility statement that speaks to not necessarily, well, to this type of accessibility, web accessibility?
I mean, we don't own the A250 pages. I don't know if
I don't think so. I know that we have a mission statement that proclaims history for all the people, so it's kind of implied there.
Okay. Well, we're right here at the end. So if anybody has any last thoughts or questions and you want to put them in the chat, otherwise, I just want to say thank you to everyone for coming. Thank you to Danny and Lori for taking the time to let us know more about things that we can do. And I know, you know, certainly, I may not get all of them, but I think even just moving forward, as I put up blog posts and things, that it will make that much difference. So that's great.
Thank you, Anne.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks to everyone for coming.